football clubs.
Tottenham Hotspur still play in White Hart Lane at their new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, a world-class stadium for a big club.
Subscribe now to see how they compare with other big football clubs.
Tottenham Hotspur are in the top tier of winners of major trophies in England, but lagging behind the most successful clubs. Their support since the Football League began puts them in 5th place, so they're one of the most popular clubs in the country. If we put their success and popularity into a graph comparing them to other big clubs in England, we can see that they compare to a number of big clubs towards the higher end of the table in both regards. But they're not at the very top, so are they a big club? We are the Classic Cup team. Tottenham Hotspur have won the league title twice, 8 FA Cups and 4 League Cups. They've won the European Cup Winners' Cup and also the UEFA Cup on 2 occasions. We're the best loved in North London. By the time Tottenham started playing in the Football League, they had already amassed a strong fan base. In their first season, they managed to get numbers slightly above the top flight average, and in their second season, this jumps by 30%. They would continue to maintain similar numbers comfortably above the top flight average until their relegation year. But this was a year in which many clubs would suffer. This continued to climb after the war, but with the club struggling and falling into the second division in the 1920s, attendances were at the top flight average for a few years. Recovery in the 30s brought about higher averages again, and once more we see this falling to the top flight average when relegated. Not bad for a second division club. Thanks to Tottenham's success in the 50s, average attendances would grow to new peaks, and the club got to very highest average attendances for 3 seasons running. The relationship between success and attendances was once again clear, as when the league finishes were not so strong in the 50s, fans were not coming in such great numbers, and the Spurs topped the league average again when becoming champions and winning trophies in the 60s. This tailed off again with lesser performances in the league, even though Spurs were still winning trophies. And when in a bad patch of form, attendances briefly fell below the average. The 70s and 80s were not the greatest times for the fan base, but they were still mostly higher than the top flight average. Spurs have been fairly consistent, but the top flight average would start to rise. In the first decade or so in their Premier League, Tottenham just about matched the top flight average fairly consistently, and it was White Hart Lane's capacity that limited the club. It was clear that a larger stadium would be needed, and playing matches at Wembley during the rebuild revealed just how popular the club are. Since moving into their stadium, Spurs have demonstrated that they can consistently fill it with numbers well over the top flight average. Put us in a final and we'll do the job. Tottenham would go for Britain's first European club trophy in the final against Atletico Madrid. After taking the lead, Atletico scored after the break, giving Spurs a sticky time for the first 15 minutes of the second half. A gift from the keeper then helped Tottenham Hotspur on the way to lifting the European Cup Winners' Cup after a stupendous and superb performance. After drawing with Manchester City in the FA Cup in the 100th final, and in an even more partisan atmosphere than in the first game, Spurs found themselves 2-1 down. But 2 goals, including the classic by Ricky Villa, made it the year of the cockerel. Spurs keep producing stars. Tottenham Hotspur's greatest ever players come from each decade from the 50s onwards, illustrating how they've had players covering different eras. There's no room for stars such as Luka Modric and Gareth Bale, but the latest addition is record goal scorer Harry Kane. Always a force. Tottenham Hotspur won their first FA Cup a few years before they were playing in the Football League. They were still playing in the Southern League at the time, so they're the only non-league club to have won the FA Cup since the Football League was formed. They gained promotion in their first season in 1909 and struggled to keep their place in the first division. Their best finish during this period was 12th place in the first division, and in 1915 they went down. For some reason, Arsenal were elected into the First Division even though Tottenham had a better Second Division record, so Spurs had to win the Second Division to get back into the top flight. They then won their second FA Cup, and the season after came second in the league. League finishes fell away and Spurs were a mid-table club in the mid-20s. That was until relegation at the end of the decade. They would then spend a few seasons in the Second Division. Promotion in the mid-30s was followed by a strong league finish, but they were soon back in the Second Division and remained there until the 50s. The 1950s heralded a new era in the history of Spurs, as they won their first league title in 1951 and came runners-up in the league a year later. Although finishers were now weak for a few seasons, at the end of the 50s they were back under the reign of Bill Nicholson, and despite a dip in 1959, they would come back in the 60s to win England's first league and FA Cup double. The side would retain the cup and then go on to win the European Cup Winners' Cup, the first British side to do so, all while remaining challengers in the league title. Tottenham were now a force in English football and won the FA Cup again. Spurs came into the 70s winning 2 League Cups and the UEFA Cup, but during this time their league form was declining, and at the end of the 70s they spent a brief period in the Second Division. However, they soon recovered and in the 80s won the FA Cup in back-to-back seasons. League finishes were much improved, and this enabled them to enter and win their second UEFA Cup. Tottenham would have a mixture of mid-table and third-place finishes, and won the FA Cup in 1991. After the beginning of the Premier League, Tottenham's final league standings became average, and they have even finished in the bottom half of the table. But they have won the League Cup on 2 occasions. Since 2010, they have had consistently strong form in the league, and have not been far off the top on a few occasions. It looks like Spurs will be around at the top, but they are well overdue a trophy, and certainly a league title. Tottenham are the classic cup side. They may have won only 2 league titles, but they won most of their FA Cups when the FA Cup was the most sought after prize. They were the first English side to win European honours, and 3 European titles is better than a lot of big football clubs. Spurs have been a consistently popular side, getting better than the average support for most of their history. Their new stadium is packed every week, and there is no sign of this changing. Spurs have been involved in their share of classic matches, but not as frequently as some of the other big clubs. They have had great players spanning the decades, a good number of them world class. Tottenham Hotspur have been a force present in English football since the 50s, and are always expected to win silverware. Their European record is good, but in recent years success has not been so forthcoming. This has not affected their fan base, and they are undoubtedly one of the nation's favourite clubs. Their trophy haul, popularity and players over time make them without doubt one of England's
big football clubs.
Why have such a big club only won 2 league titles?
Please comment below. Like and subscribe to Big Football Clubs to watch videos as they're released each week.